Hey everyone, it's AnnaSophia Robb, and you're about to take a look at my Nocturnal cover shoot for The Expecting on Quibi.
So, first of all, how has your quarantine been during this pandemic?
Um, how's my quarantine been?
Complicated
It's
question.
been, yeah, I think it's a complicated one. It's a time of awakening, that is for sure. And yeah, I don't know how quarantine has been. I think it's been a lot of emotions. How's your quarantine been?
Very, very similar. A lot of ups and downs, and personal ups and downs, world ups and downs. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I think, what everyone was favorite quarantine binge, which was Little Fires Everywhere. I thought that
Um,
really captured 2020, having been obviously made prior to this year. It really delved into a lot of different issues, and really with a lot of depth that is really rare to see on TV nowadays, especially dealing with intersectionality in such a beautiful way. What was it like working with Reese and Carrie on that?
Thank you. Thanks for watching. I know I feel so really privileged and honored to have been part of that series. And I think when you were talking about like it captures 2020, I think it's that realization of like injustice, racial injustice has been going on in our country for forever. And so now in this critical moment when it's brought to light is like, I guess things come out at the right time. But I'm just grateful to be a part of it. But Carrie and Reese are just incredible women. Like they are such leaders, and they really lead with love and inclusivity. And it was the first time I had worked on a set where it was like all females at Video Village, and just all of the conversations that were happening were so complex and supportive and really interrogating the story that they were all trying to tell, and like all pushing the story, like everybody had a hand pushing the boulder up the mountain. And it was just really cool to see that happening as a young woman, and thinking like these are the kind of stories I want to tell, these are the kind of projects I want to be a part of.
And you seem to have really picked your parts with that kind of in mind. I mean, between the act and now the expecting, you have a lot of female forward, female driven stories with a lot of women behind the camera as well. What kind of is your thought process when picking these very important roles?
It's that. I mean, I think I was really fortunate to have wonderful parents and an awesome mom who they didn't push me into acting. It was a gift. It was such a blessing. And so when a door opened, we would walk through it. But school was always really important in my life. And so the decision from a very young age of like, do I want to stay in school, or do we want to go make this movie? And I know that is such a huge privilege, but it set in my mind, like, is this story worth telling? Is it worth not being in, like, I don't know, the real world, or, having a different kind of education? And so I've carried that with me throughout college and now here. And I'm like, okay, what are the media is so influential, as we have seen in 2020 especially. And so it's deciding of like, whose stories are we telling, whose stories are we amplifying, and obviously we need a lot more diversity in that storytelling. But like, I love The Expecting because Mary Herman is our director,
I know.
and it's the story of sort of an unlikable lost woman who is relentlessly like just put through the ringer and just keeps fighting. And it was hard to make, but a lot of fun, and I felt strong after finishing it.
I've only seen the first 3 episodes, and a lot happens obviously in the first 3 episodes, and I can't wait to see more. But just that, I feel like that character is so different. Like with the act, Joey King is the one kind of having all of her moments, and you are kind of this constant and supportive character. And in this, you're kind of at the center and you're dealing with horrific elements. You're dealing with a lot of like personal anguish. What was it kind of like stepping into, I don't want to call it horror, but like something that was very kind of different for you?
Yeah, I haven't made a horror film since I was like 11. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
But I think what I learned, I personally am not a fan of horror, but I've learned to develop a taste for it, especially with like Jordan Peele's Get Out. Like, I think that was the first moment where I thought, oh, this is, and obviously horror has a much longer history. I took a class in college about Japanese cinema, and we watched a lot of like old Japanese horror films, and I started to realize that it's a lot of horror is a critique, or it's like there are all these subconscious fears or societal fears, and you get to sort of play with it in this dynamic way. And I remember reading the script and thinking, yeah, pregnancy is horrifying. Like, your body changes, you have no control over what's happening, your like legs swell up, your body swells up, you have like this alien inside of you just eating your nutrients, your mood swing, like all of these crazy things. And I thought, wow, this is such a fun sort of play on being pregnant. And then also Emma's facing all of these different people who are around her who are not supporting her, who just want to have control over her body and what is going to happen to it and the product of what is growing inside of her. And so I thought it was a really topical project and approached maternity in a different way that I think, you know, it's really entertaining, but at the same time, when you dig down deep into it, it's actually is a lot to say.
That's what I exactly wanted to talk with you about. Not to bring in Little Fires Everywhere too much, but in both shows, your character has this kind of moment of being able to choose. And in The Expecting, you see her go to the doctor and choose to, you know, keep her child. What, I guess, do you want to speak a little bit about the current issues in the world and with women's right to choose potentially being threatened in this upcoming election, or with this new Supreme Court justice being nominated?
Well, I think it's, I feel really honored as an artist to be able to tell stories about current issues and have people engage with these dialogues. I think everybody's going to have a different opinion because it's their own body, and it's their own experience, and they've had, you know, they've been either raised a certain way or they've had a certain experience that has changed their mind. So to be able to tell stories and show, I think one of the problems that we have right now are making these like blanket statements and just pushing it out rather than actually seeing people and seeing their struggles. So like in Little Fires Everywhere, we see a young woman, she's had several children, she wants a career, but she's in a place where she doesn't feel like she can choose. And, you know, and then we flash, and then the rest of the series is, you know, about Reese's dynamic or Elena's dynamic with Izzy, and seeing the consequences of that. They're neither right nor wrong. With The Expecting, Emma has, you know, she doesn't know, you know, was it rape? Was it something else? Was it, you know, it's really complicated. And so I think being able to look at these stories and have, rather than just make general claims, having that specificity of the character and the complications, I think that's how we need to look at people and look at their decisions. You can't slap a label on things. You have to really like investigate it and then know the consequences of either keeping that child or not keeping that child. And so that's sort of, I don't know, I think it's really valuable, and I think it's such an exciting time that we live in a society where those are the conversations that we get to talk about as we progress towards giving more people rights. over them.
I think you do a fantastic job on your social media outlets to really kind of humanize certain issues and give a voice to people who might not have a same platform. In the last, couple weeks or in this past summer, how have you kind of paired your own status and privilege with spotlighting these really important issues and conversations? What kind of drew you to speak up about certain things on Instagram or other social media posts?
I think it goes back to how I'm a Christian, so I think that all lives are important, but especially now Black lives. I mean, it's obvious in this country, like there is a history of systemic racism and bias. And I know I have to unpack that in my own self in an everyday way. And I think it's just part of being a human. Like, how am I supposed to enjoy my rights if my neighbor can't enjoy that? It's like you can't privilege one person's body over another, even though that's what our culture does. And so I so appreciate all of the activists who have made this their work day to day, because that's exhausting. And also just to put yourself in different shoes of, going through the world and having it not feel like it's for you, but against you, is like, that doesn't sit right. I think it's just it's a gut thing when you get down to it. And it's like, what is more important? Like, we're all on one planet. We have a limited number of days. Like, are you going to use it to raise people up or tear them down?
I completely agree. And I think that's a really beautiful and honest way of saying that too, while still being relatable, not taking on everything, but small steps and just thinking about yourself and how you can actively, show that you're against certain things. And like you said, bringing people up.
And it's overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so overwhelming. I look at my phone every day and I'm like, God, this presidency is an absolute nightmare. But it's also it's a symptom of where I think everybody is at. It's not. So we have an individual choice to, fight the power and stand for something different, I guess.
Exactly. I want to get a little bit more into the expecting, because it is so exciting, and Quibi is such a fun platform, I feel like. Coming off of being on Hulu for both The Act and Little Fires Everywhere, where episodes were pushing an hour, sometimes an hour 15, what was it like to completely kind of reorient and do these 8-minute long episodes? Like, that's what seems so jarring to me, like being in that world. But how was that transition?
We filmed it like a movie. So it starts out, like, I think how Quibi, a lot of the projects that are narrative, they're narrative Quibis. Originally a film, and then they sort of truncated them and added like arcs, so there were more cliffhangers.
Okay.
So we filmed it as an indie film. It felt very much of that indie vibe, but the only thing that was different was it felt like the scenes were much shorter. It was actually really interesting to be like, okay, what is the arc of this scene? Usually you have a longer, like more dialogue. And so I think that took some adjusting. But then it's just, they changed the frame, so it's a little bit bigger. But I think it's fun when you watch Quibi, and as I watch shows, they really are bingeable. And if you don't want to spend a full hour watching something and you just kind of want a little bit of entertainment or a little bit of horror, a little bit of comedy, like different, you get your sort of smorgasbord of entertainment.
And it's high production value too, which is nice. It's not like YouTube and you're like looking at random stuff. Like, you're looking at something that easily could be in theaters or be on a different network. So that was like just refreshing for me, like as a watcher.
And it's high quality, and I think that's what they're supposed to do. I think that's also part of Quibi, is in a couple of years from now, the rights go back to the director, I believe, and they can re-edit it as a feature. But it is, it's like, we used amazing camera and there's lighting, and it's like, it's the production value of And now you can also screen share it. So if you want to watch it, if you don't just want to watch it on your phone, you can also watch it on a bigger screen.
Perfect. And what was it like working with Mary Herman too? Like a legendary kind of thriller director with American Psycho especially, but now kind of taking on this different, more like female-centered storyline. What was it like working with her and Rory Culkin and Mira Sorvino? And like you had just had a fantastic cast and crew, it seemed like.
Yeah, we had a great cast and crew. We filmed them outside of Boston. Good people. We all became very close, filming in the winter, outside, in the mud, in the dark. Mary's super cool. I remember walking into the audition room and being so nervous because I had so much respect for her. And she's this very sort of demure woman. She sits, I mean, now that I know her, I love her, but she's very sophisticated and I never know what she's thinking. And she just sort of sat there with like her little coat and her short hair. She's very thoughtful. And she's a real artist, you know, she's like a real sort of 80s, 90s feminist, like out of the box thinker, like boots on the ground filmmaker. And I love that. I love her vibe. She loves the gore, you know, she likes playing with that material. So it was really, I had such a pleasure working with her and going through the script and talking about all the scenes. And Rory Culkin is so talented. He is so talented. And I think he's really captivating in this, actually. When I was watching on my little screen on my phone, I thought, damn, he's really good. And he's a lovely, lovely person. He was there for the whole shoot and he'd like, you know, wouldn't work a week and then he'd show up and he's like so happy. You know, a lot of actors, they're like, oh, they just complain all the time. Never. Rory, never, ever, ever. Just a lovely human spirit. And Mira was so, I mean, she's been around forever. She's had so much experience. She has so many stories. She has so much empathy for people. And it was a real pleasure also working with her too, because she's kind of a legend.
Definitely. And you are too. You're right up there with everyone else. Nice. I know. I grew up watching Bridge to Terabithia. Like, I'm so excited to talk to you. But I don't want
to. You know, it makes me, I'm starting to feel old now. Like, I'm starting to know when people are like, I watched that when I was a kid. And I remember thinking, you know, in college where I wasn't embarrassed. I was always honored, but now I'm like, wow, I was a part of people's childhood. Like, that's, I don't know. It's weird.
Well, we don't have that big of an age difference. I mean, you were like a kid filming it too, but it is still like, you know, it's part of like the zeitgeist and the canon and like all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I was 12. Yeah.
Just want to quickly wrap up with kind of talking about what you have next going on for you or what you're looking forward to in 2021. I don't know if some of your productions were pushed back a little bit more because of COVID, or what do you have kind of working on right now? What's going on?
Yeah, things were pushed back. I think the show that I haven't started yet was supposed to air like 2 weeks ago. It's been so long. Anyway, yeah, so The Expecting is coming out, and then I am starting work on Dr. Death. It's based on this true crime podcast that's absolutely wild. If you haven't listened to it, it's terrifying. But it's a great story. So we're filming that in a couple weeks.
That cast is insane too. I looked that up and like that's like literally like one of the best casts I've ever seen. So that will probably be a lot of fun too. Are you guys filming that in New York? What's the plan for that?
We are.
Okay, so it's easy.
Yeah, we're filming in New York. Yeah. I'm back in New York, and yeah, just as long as everybody like keeps their effing mask on, and takes care of each other, we'll be good.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for asking really great questions and meaningful. It's nice to have a conversation.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so
you
much.
as well.
Bye.